Hi everyone, I'm Cassandra Batista and I'm going to be discussing the de-emphasizing of culture in the classroom. And so let's start with the de-emphasizing of culture and what that actually is. So there were some key terms that were coined as cultural assimilation, melting pot, and it's where we had immigrants coming over to America and we wanted them to assimilate to what our identity, as far as that we spoke English, we did these traditions, these were the main religions in the United States, and that was the expectation of the culture and the immigrants that were coming in. Now, over the course of time, we've lost a bit of something that was special, which was that uniqueness, that culture that made that individual who they were and what made America so great to begin with. And the problem is that in the classroom, our teachers making this worse by de-emphasizing culture in the classroom. And that comes with its own effects. Let's take a look at first what causes de-emphasization in the classroom. What's the problem? So part of the problem is that we have teachers that are majority white. 80%, in fact, of our teachers in the field are white, and in fact, the majority of them are female. The problem is that 55% of our students in 2025 will actually be what was considered in the past as minority. So there's a bit of a thought that maybe that we're out of touch with that culture. And so as teachers in the past, we've been taught to be colorblind. We don't see color. There's no race. We're going to treat you all fair. But in that, when we're being colorblind, are we doing our own form of implicit biases? In fact, one of my favorite quotes is by Zaretta Hammond. And she says, as teachers of culturally diverse students, we need to educate ourselves about the realities of structural radicalization in society and recognizing how colorblindness is just another form of implicit bias. And so we choose not to see color and we lose the culture in that. And our students are no longer unique and we're no longer teaching the whole child. I also spoke with a colleague of mine who teaches culturally responsive teaching out at Abilene Christian University. And she spoke to me about how there's a bit of white guilt, as white teachers will tend not to focus on culture as much, especially with Black students, because of the white privilege that we know that white people have. And she said there's a bit of guilt there about what has happened in the past and the history that's there between white and Black and the racism. And it's a bit uncomfortable for white people, and so they just tend to not address it at all, and nobody's going to have culture. We're all just going to be fair. Here's the problem in that, though. The effects are astounding. Minority students are being suspended at 3 times the rate as their white peers. They're having lower test scores in minority groups. We're seeing increased behavioral issues, increased dropout rates. And what I find really interesting, there's 2 aspects. First is that 3 times at the suspended rate, guys, that is, if you look over onto the right, is school to prison pipeline. And so a Black student that's expelled is 3 times more likely to be in contact with the juvenile justice system, which is a pipeline straight to prison as an adult. And so right there, we already have a huge disproportion. The third thing that I found, or the second thing really, that I found really interesting was our implicit biases, that minorities are assessed differently. We're seeing less minority, less Hispanic, less Black students being accepted or recognized into the gifted and talented program. The majority of the gifted and talented programs are white students. And so what can we do about this wheel of disparity? How can we make the change? Well, we have to find the balance. So before you can start anything, you have to look at what is culture. And before this class, when I thought of culture, I immediately thought of race and ethnicity, and that was the only thing I thought of. And I thought if you were Hispanic, you had this great culture, and if you were Black, you had this great, rich history. And I'm guilty of feeling as a white teacher that didn't have culture, but really, culture is so much more. It's religion, it's your socioeconomic status, your sexual orientation, your nationality, your gender, your age. All those things make up your culture. And in fact, as you've married and created your own families and your mom and dad are together, you have your own traditions and your own cultures. And so each one of us has something to bring. Now, after we've understood what culture is, part of our solution has to be culturally responsive teaching. And you're asking, what is that? Well, according to Geneva Gay, culturally responsive teaching is using the cultural knowledge, prior experiences, frames of references, and performance styles of ethnically diverse students to make learning encounters more appropriate and effective for them. It teaches to and through the strengths of the students. And essentially, that's addressing the whole child. So let me give you an example. We had students that were from Saudi Arabia, and we spoke to their family and we asked them, hey, we'd love to learn more about your culture. And so the family, because we opened that dialogue with them, was able to come in and treat us to a traditional Saudi Arabian food. They were able to discuss their culture, how it's different, how it's the same. And we opened this dialogue between our students and ourselves to create this community, this sense of awareness. And that was part of it. The next thing is also addressing your own biases. Before you can start anything, you have to look at what your own biases are and really look inwardly and get uncomfortable. You have to see what implicit biases you have and make the conscious decision to try to change those. You have to cultivate awareness in your classroom. Invite people from the community into your classroom and show them what that culture is about. Ask your students what their culture is about. At the beginning of the year, I have my students fill out a cultural book all about their culture and their history, and I find the most unique stories and about my students, and I get to know them and start to build that relationship. And the great thing about that, and building those relationships, we're building trust, essentially. We're stopping that wheel of disparity. We're being more socially aware educators. We're teaching our students that we can accept one another's differences and we can actually learn to love those differences, and that's what makes us unique. And also being proud of those differences. We're teaching our students essentially how to be great human beings. One of the books that I would recommend that everybody read, whether you agree or disagree, is Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain by Zaretta Hammond. I'm halfway through the book. It's fantastic. It's the discussion of, even looking down to our literature. Are we including our multicultural students in the books that we have displayed in the classroom? Do our posters reflective? It's from the environment all the way down to how we teach, the dialogue that we have. It's a great book and I would recommend it. Thank you for listening, and I hope that I have changed your mind and you will essentially at least look at culture responsive teaching and how we can change the environment of our classroom and the culture of our campus.